There is probably nothing more badass than a black Vespa.
Because it's intense, but also I'm confident in myself to ride a Vespa.
Exactly.
What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I am a 29-year-old man who has never read the Percy Jackson series before, but I'm reading them now for the very first time on a quest to determine if this is a book series that we've all been sleeping on as a society. I am not on this quest alone, though. I am joined by a podcast writer and producer, a podcaster of all sorts. She's a producer of Unseen and Wolf 359. It's Sarah Shachat. Sarah, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm so happy to be here, Mike.
I'm very excited to have you here. It's been far too long since we have talked at all because of the world, but also been on a podcast together. So I'm glad that we are making this happen. Before we get into resuming chapter 2 of The Sea of Monsters and continuing through some more chapters of it, because these initial chapters are of interesting length.
They are.
Where I was thrown off of my Lightning Thief-based process where everything was like exactly 20 pages. Now we're getting some variety. So who knows what we're going to cover in this episode and the next. But before we get into that, what is your background with Percy Jackson and all of the books that Rick Riordan has given to us?
Oh man, I'm glad to be on this podcast and to have started listening to The Newest Olympian to finally know how to pronounce his name correctly.
Oh, it's been good. It's been very helpful.
I don't know that I was too old for them, but I had entered my like snobby, pretentious literature phase by the time they were out.
Okay.
When I was in school. But when I had graduated college and I was very scared and desperate to write anything for anyone for any amount of money, a local, like to where I'm from in New Orleans, culture magazine that no longer exists paid me a whole $25 to review Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters.
Wow.
I'm like the only person who saw the second movie first without any other interaction with the Percy Jackson books.
That is wild, especially because what folks have told me, they have told me to not watch the second movie until I finish the first 5 books, because apparently movie 2 has book 5 spoilers or something of that effect. So that is incredibly interesting. I don't even want to know what it is, but I'm not watching the movies until I finish all 5 of the PJO books. Even the first movie, I'm just not running the risk.
You can wait. It's okay.
Yeah.
On those movies. I don't remember what I wrote, but I remember having the opinion of like, well, that was a movie that they made. It was not a good movie, but it was a movie. But it made me curious to go and read the books. So I read The Lightning Thief and Sea of Monsters kind of right after I had written that review while I was working at a Barnes & Noble. So I just took them on breaks and it was great.
Nice. That's fantastic. Well, I'm very excited to discuss this with you. And I say we get right into the mix because
let's do it.
Where we last left off, we were about to go into PE class. And as this chapter title let us know, there are going to be some ridiculous hooligans in this PE class, and it's wild. So they go to PE, narrator Percy, right off the bat, says, quote, "Our coach had promised us a free-for-all dodgeball game, and Matt Sloan had promised to kill me."
Just
amazing.
Incredible. Incredible prose.
It's so good. I love the prose. And are you familiar with Roger Bennet at all, the Men in Blazers sports podcaster?
I have listened to Men in Blazers a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So he is this British guy who is just built for narration. He also did one of the seasons of HBO's Succession podcast. He just has such a great narrator voice, and I will completely butcher his British accent, but the cadence in which this sentence was written, I read it in the Roger Bennet narration, because he goes like, "Our coach had promised for a free-for-all dodgeball game, and Matt Sloan had promised to kill me." Like, that is just such a...
Oh, man. It reminds me there was a guy like very early on in the pandemic. I don't think it was Roger Bennet, but it was another sports commentator who started commentating like very mundane activities of like dogs at the park and people shopping for groceries. And it was the best thing. I think this falls within that category of a child's dodgeball game.
Oh, that'd be great. That might have been Arlo White, who is the guy who's in Ted Lasso, who is a world famous soccer announcer. And then they have him do the Richmond games for Ted Lasso.
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah, him narrating this would have been very fun.
Unlike the dodgeball game.
Unlike the dodgeball game. Not very fun.
No.
Though I loved PE in my K through 8 school. We had it once a week because we would have this elective system where you did a different elective each day of the week.
Oh, cool.
Science lab, music class, Spanish class, whatever. So I always really enjoyed gym class because I'm the type of person who gets competitive over everything. So having an excuse to get that out in my K through 8 years was very nice. We used to play this game. It wasn't dodgeball, but it was similar. I believe it was called Medic, or at least it was a game where there were medics.
I'm familiar with this, where it works similar, but you can heal people.
Yes, you have people
Did you have a
scooting
scooter?
around. Yeah, it's like the little scooters that you can go underneath cars in, basically. And you can scoot around, and if someone gets hit, they lay down, and then you get to heal them. Man, we would fight over being the medic because it was so much fun. Just scooting around and tapping people to bring them back to life. A joy. So Percy says the gym uniform is sky blue shorts and tie-dye shirts. And I gotta say, Gen Z, who I know a lot of the audience is Gen Z, and I am a grandfather by comparison.
Elder millennial.
Am I a middle millennial born in 92?
I think we're middle millennials at this
yeah.
point, but elder millennial sounds so august that I'm just going with it.
Maybe when I turn 30, I'll start calling myself an elder millennial. But
there you go.
I do know there's a fair amount of folks who have wanted me to have more Gen Z guests, and I would say be patient because most of my podcasting peers are my age. Like my friends are my age, but I will get some younger folks who have really grown up with the books. Fear not, there is stuff in the works. But I know tie-dye is back in a big way for Gen Z. I feel like this uniform right now would be completely eaten up by Gen Z folks. Light sky blue shorts and a tie-dye shirt. I guess it's supposed to be, hippie, whatever school this is.
Yeah, it's supposed to be sort of like hippie New York-y, I guess.
Right, but now it's completely in fashion. That would be fantastic. And if Gen Z tells me anything, it would be 5 sizes too large because baggy clothes are back for some reason.
For reasons unknown.
Unknown.
Everyone has to make their own mistakes, you know? Every generation, we learn these lessons in different ways.
I think everybody just is obsessed with the fashion of what came 30 years prior. Like Gen Z right now loves 90s stuff, or I guess maybe 20 years prior, stuff that was 2000s. Because right now, Kelly, my wife, has been watching Seinfeld from the beginning because she had never really seen it. And I watched it so much with my dad growing up.
Right.
And I remember as a kid watching it thinking, wow, their clothes are so tacky. And now I watch it, I want every piece of outerwear that Jerry and George own. Their jackets are so good. Their sweaters are so fantastic. Aside from the bagginess of Jerry's shirts and stuff, the drip of Seinfeld, I have completely 180'd.
Outstanding. I'm not quite there with Elaine's stuff.
No, Elaine's stuff is rough.
It's rough. But you're right. There's some pieces in there from George and Jerry that are worth stealing.
I also want to just be able to live in New York and not have a job like George and Kramer do. That's pretty nice.
It seems like it's nice.
Yeah, I mean, they could just have 1-bedroom apartments. George is unemployed for months on end. Totally fine. Different world.
Yep.
So Percy says that they do most of their athletic activities in PE class indoors so that they don't have to jog through Tribeca looking like boot camp hippies. And I did not grow up in New York City. I've lived here for a couple of years. I've never heard of or seen any sort of high school or middle school PE class that would go outside, especially in the financial district.
No. You walk around and there are playgrounds, and at certain hours of the day, there are children in uniforms in there. But, like, not jogging down, 8th or whatever.
No, they don't have people just going in the streets.
Yeah.
Not at all. They have outdoor stuff, like you said, but it's usually caged off, fenced in playgrounds, basketball courts, soccer fields, baseball fields, whatever.
Yeah.
So this was a little bit of Uncle Rick, Your Texas is showing. But anyway, before they exit the locker room, Percy hears Tyson ask Percy for a favor. And he wants Percy to guard the door while he changes. And Percy does. And as the narrator, he notes that he tries not to sound aggravated about it, which is a really sweet moment. And that is the true testament of a good friend or a good life partner, is doing something you don't want to do, but having enough wherewithal to not express your disinterest in what you're doing.
Feeling the feeling, but not inflicting it on the other person. It's great.
Right. If I had the power to always stop and not roll my eyes at stuff, I would be a much better person. I need to control my eye rolls, for sure.
I mean, all of us do, but also there's some eye rolly stuff about this school, and some of it's okay, but
But I appreciate Percy being a good friend to Tyson.
Absolutely.
He thinks that Tyson wants him to do this because Tyson is very hairy and he has scars on his back that Percy doesn't want to ask him about. Good friend note of Percy, never wants to press for an uncomfortable question. Tyson would rip the doors off of lockers if he gets teased while changing. So Percy also is just trying to stop a mess from occurring.
And like property damage. My goodness.
The respect that Percy shows for the school, pretty high here. Look at that.
It's true.
He's a good student looking out for the integrity of the lockers in the locker room. Now, in PE class itself, the coach is barely paying attention. Sloane gets the coach to make him one of the captains, and then he makes Percy the other captain. But it doesn't matter because the jocks and the visitors, quote unquote, just go to Sloane's side automatically anyway, which feels very rude.
Defeats the purpose of captaining.
It does, and it's also an incredibly relatable middle school thing. It feels like something that would completely happen and I would be crushed by is not even being cool enough to, if you picked someone who was very good at sports and / were popular and they would just go to the other team anyway, that is just deflating.
It's crushing.
Certainly.
And like, I don't know that I've ever seen this happen, but this is like worst dodgeball fears on paper.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Narrator Percy says, on my side, I had Tyson, Corey Baylor, the computer geek, Raj Mandali, the calculus whiz, and a half dozen other kids who always got harassed by Sloane and his gang. So we're not looking like we've got the Globo Gym here. We certainly have the average Joes at best in terms of a dodgeball roster. Percy would normally not be bothered by this because Tyson alone is worth half of a team. But because there are 6 visitors and they are quite large, Percy is a little bit worried. Then Tyson mentions that he is scared because the visitors smell funny. And
man, when Tyson is scared of smells, this kid who apparently we're all fine with him living in a box in the street while he's attending school. Question mark.
To be seen, TBD, TBD, because I personally don't believe it. I refuse to believe it. But when he said this, my red flag shot up because to say smell, that confirms in my mind that he is some sort of Greek something. And I was wondering this just because of how big Tyson was described. It feels like he's got to be something. Right. And I'm still so early in the series that I don't know all of the rules. We know that there are demigods, but I don't know if there's other half breeds. Can you be a half giant? Can you be a half cyclops? I'm leaning cyclops here because a cyclops is on my cover of the book. So
That's
I
fair.
thought that could be a possibility. But once he said the smell, my thought was whatever Tyson is, he's got to be something that could attend Camp Half-Blood, whether that means he's a demigod. I don't think he's a satyr. I don't know if there's any large figures. We haven't seen anybody large. We've only seen nymphs and demigods and satyrs.
Yeah, satyrs and dryads. They're just sort of forest beings that are, you know, of the same kind as the gods, but like very much lower powered.
Right. So I don't know what other possibility Tyson could be. I just, at this point, knew he's got to be somewhere involved where he would be welcome to attend Camp Half-Blood because he said smell. So the game begins. Raj yells something in Urdu and leaves. Percy guesses that it was, quote, I have to go potty.
Incredible.
Phenomenal. Corey Baylor tries to crawl behind the wall mat and hide. Also phenomenal. Percy then gets hit quite hard, and then another ball hits Corey, even though he's behind the mat. And Percy yells to Joe Bob, one of the visitors. He was the thrower. He yells to him.
Completely normal name.
Super normal name. Yells to him that he could kill somebody. And then Joe Bob says, I hope so, Perseus Jackson. I hope so. The reddest of red flags. Get out of there right now. Because not only has he called you your full name that only the Greek people know, but have you even said your name at all to Joe Bob? I don't think he even said, hello, nice to meet you, visitor Joe Bob. My name is Percy Jackson. I don't think he said anything.
They are wearing the name tags. Percy is not.
Yes, exactly. Like that should be the scariest thing on its own. And then you've got the full name element. Get out of there. Leave right now. Percy puts this and the smell together, though, realizing that they're monsters. And then I thought, oh, is this the Sea of But no, it's not the Sea of Monsters.
The Sea of Dodgeball Monsters. I love that it's just like a single line, like on the top of the page of my edition of the book, of just like monsters. It's so good.
Narrator Percy says, all around Matt Sloan, the visitors were growing in size. They were no longer kids. They were 8-foot-tall giants with wild eyes, pointy teeth, and hairy arms, tattooed with snakes and hula women and Valentine hearts.
Incredible. No notes.
Just ridiculous. They're a biker gang in dodgeball form. And then narrator Percy says that Matt Sloan drops his ball and says, whoa, you're not from Detroit. Who? So at least we know Sloan is a legitimate, normal person.
It's nice that he wasn't in on it, that he was duped. That's nice.
Yes, he is this book's Nancy Bobofit, where he is not evil in terms of Greekness, just a bully, and a regular bully at that.
Yeah.
So the other kids on Sloan's team, understandably, get very scared, and they try to leave as well. But Marrowsucker, very normal name, throws a dodgeball that perfectly closes the door, and then it cannot be opened. So I'm imagining he must have hit it.
Crush the handle or something?
That's the only explanation. And to do that with a rubber dodgeball, you got to throw that really hard, man. Really hard. Percy yells for the giants to let the kids go because he's a wonderful hero. Joe Bob replies, quote, and lose our tasty morsels? No, son of the sea god. We Lystragonians aren't just playing for your death. We want lunch. And at this point, I wrote, Lystragonians, Dr. Moya, please help. And we'll discuss those in a future episode.
I can tell you, Dr. Moya will help you with this. And anyone who does recognize that name, then suddenly the dodgeball becomes incredibly funny. I will just say that.
Okay, I like this because this is not giving anything away, but I'm very excited. The only thing it kind of made me think of, and I don't know if this is it or if it just sounds similar, but it reminded me of Lilliputians from Gulliver's Travels. And I wonder if they are just the inverse of the Lilliputians, but I could not tell you anything about that story except for that Gulliver is big and the Lilliputians are small, because I think I only had to read an excerpt of that in high school. And then that's about it. So I have no idea.
I will not say more.
There we go. Perfect. So Joe Bob then waves his hand and makes a new set of dodgeballs appear. And I don't know what kind of magic you need to have to make this happen, I guess. But these dodgeballs are not just dodgeballs. They are bronze. They are cannonball sized. And they are perforated like wiffle balls, but with fire bubbling out of the holes, which is absolutely terrifying.
Incredible.
A great detail. The giants then pick them up with their bare hands, which is very scary. And at this, Percy yells for the coach. My thought here, yes, what has the coach been doing? How has he not been paying attention at all? But the mist is obscuring the coach from seeing anything unusual. That convenient mist.
Truly the most powerful force in this world is the mist.
Yeah, if there was ever a question, if I'm ever on any sort of panel where they ask me who is the most powerful of all of the characters in the Percy Jackson universe, the answer is the mist. Because if what happens in this dodgeball game happens and the coach doesn't bat an eye, that mist is strong.
All of the texture of what's going on. Children screaming, there's fire bubbling inside these bronze dodgeballs. God only knows what has happened to the gym clothing that the Lystragonians are wearing. There's a lot going on here.
Quite a bit. So Tyson saves Corey from being pelted with one of these. Percy tells them to head for the other exit. Joe Bob then waves his hand again, shutting the doors, and says, no one leaves unless you're out. And you're not out until we eat you, which feels like a terrible stipulation.
Don't like those rules.
No, I hate these rules. Can I please protest? Percy reaches for Riptide, which normally would be in his pocket, but because these are good gym shorts, they don't have pockets, which I gotta say, good on the school, because pockets in gym shorts is how you dislocate a pinky playing flag football. So very smart of them not to put pockets in there. So Riptide is in his jeans pocket in the locker room, which is not accessible right now. So that's unideal. Now, at this point, this is when I realized that Riptide just goes with him no matter what, because the last time Percy talked about Riptide, he had left it on his nightstand in his room. So I thought he was going to be in a situation where he was at school and then he just couldn't get Riptide at all.
Right.
But I guess Riptide, even if Percy doesn't bring it, it's not just that it returns to you if you drop it or throw it or whatever. But I guess it's just always on your person.
It's always on your person. Yeah, that's what it seems like. And that's like a more logical spell to put on a magic pen sword than if I lose this, it'll come back. It's just like, no, I am always in a 30-foot radius of you.
Yes, it's good. I guess the stipulation, which we are now learning, is that you must have pockets. And that is it.
The Achilles heel turned out to be pockets.
This is a justification of why more women's clothing needs pockets in it. Because what if it was Percy Jackson, you know?
Yep.
So 2 of the giants hurl balls at Percy. Tyson steps in front, catches them, throws them back, and it makes 2 of the giants disintegrate, extremely proving that they are monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Bob roars, "Victory will be ours." And then he says, "We will feast on your bones." Narrator Percy says, "I wanted to tell him he was taking the dodgeball game way too seriously, but before I could, he hefted another ball. The other 3 giants followed his lead." And, very scary.
I love that Percy's mind is though it always has a quip ready, even though he will not always say it.
Yes.
He's always thinking in that way, and I love that about him.
And I love that as the narrator, he shares it with us so that at least someone gets to hear this good bit, this good quip, this good remark that he thought of. Percy stands in front of the door to the locker room so that the balls thrown at him can open up the path, which is a very smart strategy, and it does work. So that has opened up the passageway. Tyson then punches Skull Eater, very normal name, in the face, and he just crumples. Joe Bob hits Tyson with a ball, and then Tyson goes sliding across the floor the entire length of the court, and he slams against a wall, which crumbles a bit on him, and then it just makes a hole in the wall to where you can see out into Church Street. Ridiculous.
Incredible. I know there are some old buildings in New York City, but that is a lot of force.
Yes, quite a bit. And I'm not exactly sure what this building would be like. But given what the buildings on Church Street look like, I would imagine a very thick-walled stone building.
Yeah.
So this is quite the throw. But thankfully, Tyson is okay. He is alive. He's certainly dazed, but he's not dead. He's not unconscious. Joe Bob is about to finish Tyson off, though, and he says that he's going to bring his food back in a doggy bag for baby cakes, capital B, so potentially their name. But Percy yells for him to stop, saying, "I'm the one you want anyway." So Percy just absolutely in hero mode at this point. Calling him out for being in hero mode, Joe Bob says, "You wish to die first, hero?" And Percy looks for his jeans in the now exploded passageway, and he sees them at the giant's feet, so he lunges towards them, which the bravery to go towards giant cannibal with fiery cannonball, my goodness, Percy.
There's hero moves, and then there is just like the desperation hero move of going unarmed towards a very dangerous thing. And I feel like not every protagonist does that. Usually it's like a secondary character who does like the heroic dive towards thing. It's cool that Percy gets to do it too.
I like it. I respect it. While he's going towards Joe Bob says, "My lunge approaches."
Which is a great line.
It's really funny. Just as Joe Bob is going to chuck a ball at Percy, a knife runs through him from behind. Classic action move. I can see this happening in the movie. Hopefully they do this properly. And then he puffs into green smoke. And of course, it's Annabeth. Of course it is.
Because of course.
I had already thought Annabeth was probably here. Once they said knife, that's Annabeth's signature weapon. Boom. Fantastic. Love that she's here. Love that it was a timely appearance. Narrator Percy goes on to say that Joe Bob muttered, "Ow," and burst into a cloud of green flame. And then Narrator Percy says, which I figured was going to make baby cakes pretty upset. Love it. So good. So good. Annabeth has a wild look in her eyes. And narrator Percy describes this look as like she'd just been chased 1,000 miles by ghosts, which honestly could be the case.
Genuinely.
Right.
You never know with Annabeth.
Yeah, this is not a hyperbole. There could be literal ghosts attacking her all the way from Virginia. Sloane comes to, and he recognizes Annabeth Annabeth punches him in the nose and tells him to leave Percy alone.
Incredible.
Iconic. We love this. Annabeth is phenomenal. She's so perfect. Now, the gym is an absolute mess. Sirens are blaring. The headmaster, named Mr. Bonsai, so yay for representation, but Mr. Bonsai, really? Clearly not a white principal.
I like to headcanon that this is someone who has, because it's a hippie school, maybe has chosen that name to be friendly and like green and stuff, but it's bad. It's a bad choice.
Yes, I hope it is not just, what should we name the Asian principal? Let's name them Mr. Bonsai. That's not ideal, because if the purpose is you want to show diversity in the upper management of the school, you can pick a last name that tells that tale. That is not Bonsai. I don't think I've ever met someone with the last name Bonsai.
I know I have not.
It is certainly not a traditional name. It is a traditional plant, but that's not the same. I don't know, we're not going to have Mr. Sushi, the principal. Come on.
It would really give a picture of this school if it was Mr. Sushi, the principal, I will just say.
Maybe.
Then it's a whole other level.
Yeah.
And I'm rooting for Percy to get out for many different reasons.
Maybe they went with Bonsai because, like you're saying, hippie school, and it's more of this peaceful, relaxing tree associated with meditation and all that kind of stuff. But if Uncle Rick was just going for a last name of an Asian teacher, and also this is a white guy named Mr. Bonsai, I don't think there's a good answer to who is Mr. Bonsai. So Mr. Bonsai tries to get in with the crowd of teachers that is approaching now. Annabeth reveals that she has been following Percy basically all day, but could never get him alone. Percy knows that she was the shadow, and he's very embarrassed that she was looking at him through his bedroom window.
As anyone would be.
Incredibly natural, especially for someone that you definitely have a crush on. But she says there's no time to explain. She snaps, and then she looks red in the face herself, though. So maybe she was a little, maybe she wasn't hating the situation too much there. Then she starts to say, I just didn't want to, but then doesn't finish the sentence. And I was screaming at my book, to what? To what? Annabeth says, meet me outside and bring Tyson. Percy's very confused. Again, she says, no time. Bonsai and the teachers then get in. Sloane starts to blame Percy for all of this, and rather than try to explain in what is certainly a lost cause, Percy grabs Riptide and Tyson and jumps out of the hole in the wall, and that is the end of chapter 2, and that's a good place for us to take a pause for the mid-roll as we get into a natural transition of the lightning brief. Learn about cool things for the podcast, and also where you can get sweet deals on stuff. Yay! Hello, and welcome to this special mid-roll break in the episode. Now, for the first book, we called this segment The Lightning Brief, because the first book was The Lightning Thief. And I had called it The Lightning Brief for the first episode about the Sea of Monsters, but thanks to listener Timo Faber, we now have a wonderful suggestion for a way to rename this mid-roll break. Instead of calling it The Lightning Brief, for book 2, we will be calling it The Sea of Sponsors, which is an incredible name. Thank you, Timo, so much. I'm very excited to switch up the pun for whatever book we are covering. I already know that for the third book, it'll be The Titan's Purse. So yes, welcome to The Sea of Sponsors. Speaking of sponsors, if you never want to hear sponsors, you could go to thenewestalympian.com/Patreon and join the Patreon, because patrons get access to ad-free episodes. Not only do you get access to the episodes early, sometimes I upload them earlier on Sunday or on Saturday. I've even come close to a Friday posting before, so you can get access to episodes a couple of days ahead of time, but also these episodes on Patreon have no ads in them at all. So if you don't want to deal with the sea of sponsors, I got a cool little boat for you. It's called the SS Patreon, and if you go to thenewestalympian.com/Patreon, you can hop on aboard. And speaking of hopping on aboard, I want to thank our newest patrons who have joined, and they've decided to board the SS Patreon, and I'm going to thank them for doing so. So shout out to our newest Super God tier patrons, Mist and Mike Sachs. Shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Jeffrey and Anthony James. And shout out to our newest Demigod tier patrons, Rodith Kalna, Aaron Mallet, Sophie Rose Hayden, and Eddie Burns. I thank you all for your support. May Poseidon bless you all by making sure you never get seasick when you're on any sort of boat. Also, just another reminder, if you want to see me doing Potterless Live, we've got shows coming up in Atlanta and Tennessee very soon, March 3rd and March 4th, Tennessee, then Atlanta. Tickets are live now at potterlesspodcast.com/live. I'm going to be joined by Johnny in Nashville. We're going to be doing a bracket to determine what is the best Harry Potter food/drink. And then in Atlanta on the 4th, we're going to do a bracket to determine what's the best Harry Potter quote. It's going to be a super fun, silly time. And again, tickets are live at potterlesspodcast.com/live. If you're looking for new podcasts to listen to, maybe you're all caught up on TNO and you want something else, you could check out some of the other wonderful shows from Multitude. And one of those shows is Exolore. Exolore is hosted by Dr. Moya McTeer, from the newest Olympian. She is an astrophysicist and folklorist, and every other week, she explores fictional worlds by building them with a panel of expert guests, or interviewing professional world builders, or reviewing the merits of worlds that have already been built. So if you've ever wondered what life would be like on a planet different from your own, or how people craft worlds that are different from our own, Exolore is for you. And you can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Exolore or going to exolorepod.com. And Exolore is spelled EXOLORE. And before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of these ads will be read by me, others of them won't. The ones that aren't read by me are inserted locally. So if you live in Jordan, don't be surprised if you hear an ad in Arabic. And once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian. And we're back, and we are here to begin discussing Chapter 3, which has a very fun title, We Hail the Taxi of Eternal Torment.
I read that and I was like, you need to be more specific about the taxi.
Yes, because this could go a lot of different directions. And what I'm trying to do now, what I'm doing in my notes when I read these books, is I try to make a guess right off the bat, just based on the title alone. So my first thought here was that they try to catch a cab to Half-Blood Hill, but turns out to be driven by some sort of monster whose shtick is time loops. But then I realized, no, that would be too on the nose. My revised guess is that they just tried to go in a regular cab, but they get stuck in terrible traffic, and that is the eternal torment. You will see I am wrong with both of these guesses.
No, but you're thinking in the right way. Man, a time loop would be interesting.
Yeah, I had less faith in it because we kind of got a time loop with the Lotus Casino already, so
That's
to do
true.
that in back-to-back books would be So I thought maybe it was a misdirect where the title makes it seem like it's this big fancy Greek monster of sorts, but really there was just a shutdown on the George Washington Bridge or something.
Right.
So once Percy and Tyson meet up with Annabeth, she asks Percy, where did you find him in italics? So right off the bat, I'm thinking Annabeth knows what's up with Tyson. What's very exciting, though, is narrator Percy reveals to us that he has missed Annabeth more than he wants to admit because he loves her. He loves her.
And they're meant to be together.
They are. And it's funny because all book one, I kept caveating this with, if they're just friends, it's okay.
Let it go,
I don't
Mike.
want to force it. Now I'm all in. Now I'm full. Like this narration just in the first 2 to 2.1 chapters, I'm all in on Percy Beth. It has to be a thing. Now I will be crushed if they don't end up together. I wasn't trying to force the issue, but now that we've gotten the awkwardness and we've got the picture and they're emailing each other and he's missed her, like now I'm all in, baby.
She's following him around all day. Like it's just...
They're blushing. They're both blushing. Come on. So Percy pushes back, saying that Tyson is his friend because Percy interprets the italics him as a negative thing. I think it's just Annabeth knows something that Percy doesn't. Annabeth asks if he's homeless, and Percy, again, thinks that this is her being rude and asks what that has to do with anything, and also says that she can just talk to Tyson directly because he's a big boy and he can speak for himself. I like Percy taking the defense of Tyson here. I do think he is misguided. I think that it's Annabeth not doing the best job of communication, but look, they're not even dating yet. They can work through these communication issues.
And also just like Percy has had a day a little bit. Like he's just jumped out of a opening in a wall of a flaming building. Like your thought process is going just a little too quickly at that point. I feel like to catch the nuance of what Annabeth means here.
Right. And to quote Bella from Twilight, I believe that Percy has run out of his quota of patience for the day because too much has happened. So I think that at this point, he has no desire to dilly-dally or sidestep. He just wants to be fully direct, which is already a vibe of a New Yorker, but a New Yorker who's gone through this day I completely understand Percy here.
Oh, yeah.
Annabeth is surprised that Tyson can talk. Tyson shows that he can, and he calls Annabeth pretty, which she is grossed out by, which
Understandable.
I get it. Right.
But I'm glad that Tyson is also shipping this.
Yes, at least Tyson can recognize beauty. Percy is shocked that she's being so rude. And this is where I just said in my notes, I think this is something where Annabeth knows what's up. Yeah. And she's just asking questions as a way to confirm her suspicions, not necessarily scold Tyson for being who he is. Regardless, I do think Annabeth took it a little too far with her reaction of ew, gross, especially if she knows something more about Tyson. But that being said, you are pretty, even if it is a catcall, it's not the worst catcall, but it's still kind of a catcall. Like, I've certainly never received any because I'm a white guy, so no. But I've definitely been with women in my life hearing them get catcalled, and it's not fun. When I was in Austin, Texas, my sister was touring the University of Texas. She was a junior in high school. I was walking down the streets of Austin with her, and this group of dudes rolled down the window in their car driving by and said, "Hey, yo, white girl, what's up?" And that was an interesting thing for 7th grade Mike Schubert to hear. Said about his sister.
Oh, wow. You buried the lead with the 7th grade.
Yeah, I'm 4 years younger. My sister was a junior. So they were catcalling a 17-year-old at most girl. So, right. Yeah.
Amazing.
Quality gentlemen in that car, quality human beings.
You know, it's interesting. I feel like there's stuff that goes on with, we'll get into a little bit more of like what Annabeth knows about Tyson. And there is like a little bit of that, I feel like, demigod way of looking at the world that isn't always the best going on here, in addition to just a big smelly boy calling you pretty, which is weird to take, but everybody just needs to calm down and get in the cab. That's my stance on this.
Yeah. There are bigger things at stake. Let's talk about this in the cab, specifically the cab of eternal torment. So Percy notices that Tyson's hands aren't even burned, and Annabeth says, of course not, and then says she was shocked that the Lystragonians even attacked with him around. Now I'm really curious as to what is he that would scare a cannibal? This was making me think maybe he is a demigod. Maybe he is a demigod of whoever the god of fire would be, which does Demeter count as that? I don't know who would really be the god of fire, but I was thinking, what could Tyson be that would scare giant cannibals? This, for me, kind of ruled out giant because I don't think giant cannibals would be scared of other giants. So I was trying to think, I need like a food pyramid, not a food pyramid, the food chain. I need a food chain of Greek figures. What is higher than giant cannibal on the food chain? Tyson tries to touch Annabeth's hair, and that's too far. She smacks his hand away. Fully approve of this. That is gross. Never do that for anybody. No touching of hair, and no requesting of touching of hair either. Don't do that. No one likes that ever.
Yes, please do not do that.
Percy is confused by the word Annabeth used because she directly called them the Lystragonians. She clarifies that they are a race of giant cannibals who live in the far north. She says Odysseus ran into them once, and she's never seen them as far south as New York. Percy can't even pronounce it, so he asks, what's the English word for this? And Annabeth says Canadians. I don't know what the reason behind her picking Canadian was. Maybe it's just because they're from more north than New York, but I think that's hilarious. I think it's so good.
It's very, very good. I will offer you an alternate if you would like to picture them as something other than Canadians.
Okay.
Because these guys, the Lystragonians, they do show up in the Odyssey. And they also show up in other, like, Greek texts where it's mentioned as, like, often in ancient Greek literature. I say this with my baby classics major hat on. Please don't at me, actual scholars. When someone's talking about a place, they'll often talk about the mythological origins of that place and then get into, like, who actually ruled and stuff. And so the island of Sicily was first said to be inhabited by these guys, the Lystragonians and also Cyclopses.
Whoa. Yeah. That is very cool. Shout out to Sicily. Shout out to Sicilian pizza. Shout out to my buddy Sal, whose family comes from Sicily. Good place that I've never been.
If you want, you can picture Joe Bob and Marrowsucker as having thick Sicilian accents.
That is much more fun than what I was imagining, which just based on Joe Bob, I was thinking Midwestern United States.
I know.
I do like the idea of someone being incredibly Sicilian and being named Joe Bob.
It's phenomenal. Because clearly, like, whatever has happened to these guys, these giant cannibals, they have adopted some form of, like, culture.
Yes.
For the Valentine's Day heart tattoos and the hula girls and all that.
Yeah. It's just biker gang culture for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that does make me think, do biker gangs in Sicily, is it just Vespas?
Yeah, do you have space for, like, a big chopper, or is it better and more effective to be on a Vespa?
Yeah, you just have a cool black Vespa instead of a
Ooh.
pale powder blue one or a yellow one. It's a edgy Vespa.
There is probably nothing more badass than a black Vespa.
Because it's intense, but also I'm confident in myself to ride a Vespa.
Exactly.
So Annabeth says that they've got to go. She asks Percy if he's had the dreams. And he says, yeah, the ones about Grover. And she goes, Grover? Wait, no, what about Grover? And Percy tells her his dream and then goes, why? Wait, what were you dreaming about? Which is so funny. Gosh.
I love them together.
It's fantastic. Annabeth says camp, big trouble at camp. And this has me very worried. And Percy as well. Percy brings up that Sally also said something was wrong at camp. Annabeth doesn't know exactly what is wrong, but regardless, they gotta go. So she says that she's been attacked by monsters all the way down from Virginia, whether they are ghosts or not, we don't know. Percy says that he's had no attacks before today. And Annabeth is confused, but then stops midway through a sentence and then says, oh. And then Percy goes, what do you mean, oh? And it's Tyson raising his hand like he's still in class, which
Incredible.
Is so cute, so adorable. Love how polite he is. He asks about the cannibals, saying Percy is the son of Poseidon. That's what they said, that you were the son of the sea god. And Percy decides to tell him what's up, just kind of spilling all of the Greek-related beans. And Tyson gets the new role of proxy for a reader who skipped book one because Percy kind of artfully explains some of what happened in the plot of the first book. I will say, so far in all of these chapters, Uncle Rick has done a very good job of keeping anyone who missed the first book up to speed in an entertaining way.
Yes.
It's always interspersed. It's when you need to know it, and it's not pages upon pages of recap. It's very well done, and it continues to be well done into this chapter.
Absolutely.
Tyson isn't shocked by this exposition dump, though, but he does frown and look confused when Percy says that his dad is Poseidon. He starts to say, but then police cars go by and they need to get moving. And Annabeth says, we can talk in the taxi. I found this to be very interesting. Specifically, getting sad about Poseidon made me think that he might come from some sort of race that doesn't like Poseidon, and that's why he was having this conflict of, oh, but you and I get along. It's similar to the Annabeth
situation in book one, yeah.
Right. So I don't know enough about Poseidon to know of anyone that he has fought. I don't know if he has fought giants or trolls or Cyclops or whatever, but I'm imagining it is some sort of group of people that have beef with Poseidon, or if he is a demigod, it's some sort of god that doesn't like Poseidon. And this was kind of me thinking, oh, the fire thing, fire and water don't mix. Maybe that comes into play. Not really sure what's up. Percy thinks that taking a cab is going to be mad expensive, which is pretty
correct.
accurate. Taking a cab to Long Island would be so much money. Annabeth says, trust me. And I wrote in my notes, what, even another Lotus card? What are we doing here? There's no casinos in New York City, so I don't know how you're going to get through this. Percy asks, what about Tyson? But then he makes the call that Tyson's got to come with us. There is no figuring out what to do with him. He's coming along.
Yeah.
Annabeth agrees, but Percy interprets it as a begrudging acceptance, like Tyson is some sort of burden. And this really does just make me think that Annabeth knows what's up, and we'll just have to wait and see what the deal with Tyson is, because Uncle Rick is making this suspenseful, and he's not going to tell us right off the bat. Come on!
No, this and the previous chapter are doing a very good job of, like, seeding kind of the plot hooks of, like, what's up with Tyson? What does Annabeth know? What's going on with the camp? So it can be frustrating in the moment, but he does a good job of disguising that by having them, like, need to get out of the city ASAP.
Exactly. There is justification to why none of these questions are getting answered, is because the police are here and we need to leave. And in addition to that, camp might be in danger. We got to get to camp very fast. So
Exactly.
we got to get out of here quickly. We got to get to our destination quickly. Lots of reasons to leave. Annabeth stops at the corner of Thomas and Trimble, which I know are tiny little side streets. And this would be a great call because it's in between major streets. It's two basically alley streets. However, I did look up the intersection of Thomas and Trimble on Google Maps, and it is directly between a state police building and the headquarters for the NSA.
Oh, no.
So this is a horrible place to try to be incognito and to hide from the police. I get logistically this works, and location-wise it makes sense. Little alleyway, no busy cars, sure. But to be smack dab in the middle of the cops and the NSA, not ideal.
There are not enough invisible Yankees caps. Oh, no.
So Percy notices that her chin is cut. She's got twigs in her hair, like she's been sleeping outside, and the cuts in her jeans, suspiciously, look like those of claw marks. So Annabeth has had a rough adventure.
Do not love that.
Yeah, don't love it at all. Sirens wail around them. I wonder why. Maybe because you're next to a police building. But Annabeth pulls out a drachma. And then Percy, as the narrator, describes what a drachma is. She shouts, and apologies to all the Greek listeners, but she shouts, Stethi o harma diaboles, which is ancient Greek for stop chariot of damnation. So they really are taking the taxi of eternal torment. I was wrong. Annabeth throws the drachma into the street and it melts into the asphalt. The asphalt then melts into a pool of bubbling red liquid and a car bursts through it. It is a gray taxi with writing on the side that Percy struggles to read because of his dyslexia. The passenger's window rolls down, and an old lady mumbles, "Passage, passage?" And Annabeth tells her 3 people to Camp Half-Blood. And when they start to enter, this old lady says that they won't take his kind, in italics, pointing at Tyson. I am so intrigued. What is Tyson? I have to know.
It's coming. It's coming.
And just as I started to say, why does everyone hate Tyson? Narrator Percy, in a less eloquent way, asks, what was it? Pick on big and ugly kids day? Which, not the kindest way to describe Tyson. The sentiment is there, but maybe just call him big and leave out attraction. So Annabeth says that she will pay 3 extra drachma upon arrival, and the old lady agrees. So Annabeth has to know who Tyson is. Otherwise, she wouldn't be coughing up extra drachma.
Absolutely
no way.
Not.
Percy then realizes it's not just one lady, but it's 3. And it is the 3 ladies that we talked about actually in a Dr. Moya episode, the 3 women that share one eye that you might know from Disney's Hercules, the Grey sisters. It is them.
Yep.
So they floor it, and then an ad plays in the taxi.
Which I love. It's incredible.
Very on brand for a New York City taxi. It goes, "Hi, this is Ganymede, cupbearer to Zeus. And when I'm out buying wine for the Lord of the Skies, I always buckle up." And of course, I'm going to ask Dr. Moya in the interstitial episode after this, what's the deal with her/him? I have no idea who they are. So the seatbelt in this cab is a black chain, which does not feel great. Does not feel like a very safe thing.
Or like very effective in terms of preventing, like you won't fly through the windshield, but I feel like you could break some ribs or something with that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to do its job.
No.
During the drive, the middle lady yells at the left lady while driving, and the left lady says, "Well, if you'd give me the eye, Tempest, I could see that." And Percy thinks, wait a minute, give her the eye? And the driver is Wasp. The other one on the right is Anger. And the driving, as described here, is just absolutely wild. At one point, narrator Percy describes it as, "They left my stomach somewhere on Broome Street." And I gotta ask Rick, he is picking the most obscure street names. He has not picked a big name street yet. He will soon, but he hasn't yet. Broome Street is a street.
Yeah, I know where that is, but...
Right, but it's one away from Canal Street, which is much more of a street that people know about. So I don't know if he's trying to go for the streets that aren't as well known. He's trying to get some hipster cred, which, if so, shout out to you, Uncle Rick. But I also don't know if he's just on Google Maps and he's picking streets at random that sound good. Broome Street is big enough to have its own Wikipedia page, but it has 4 total paragraphs. Canal Street has 3 entire sections of a Wikipedia page. So a little different in terms of street popularity.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that he is trying to pick like more, because Uncle Rick is trying to be an authentic New Yorker and he succeeds to varying degrees. And so I kind of think it is a little bit like, what is a street? I'm not going to have them going down Broadway or anything. So
Right,
what's a street that like a local New Yorker would know that maybe other people would not? So that's what I think is going on. Although if he's just trying to pick the most obscure streets possible, because that's how the Grey sisters would drive on the most obscure streets possible, then I'm here for that too.
Yeah, and Thomas and Trimble, that is the deepest of cuts.
It is the
Those are
deepest of cuts.
tiny streets.
Absolutely.
Broome Street also could be fun because they're kind of like witches, the Grey sisters. So for them to drive down Broome Street, I think is pretty fun.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it is Broome with an E at the end, but it's still Broome Street. So Annabeth reveals that these are the Grey sisters' taxi, and I gotta say, it seems like the dyslexia representation here is better because when he saw the letters, it wasn't just a word scramble. He saw GYAR, which is a word scramble of gray, but then it was SSIRES, and it isn't just sisters. It's a little different, and when I talked to Amanda about dyslexia earlier in The Newest Olympian in a previous episode, she had mentioned that it's not always just jumbling up the letters. So to have mistakes in the letters or the length of the word or not knowing when a word starts and ends, seems like we're getting some improvement in terms of dyslexia representation, which is nice.
We love that.
Love to see it. Love improvement.
Oh, yeah.
Growth. Who doesn't love it? So the sisters are just fighting the whole way. They turn onto Delancey, much more well-known street, and then they head up the Williamsburg Bridge at 70 miles per hour.
My blood pressure rose.
I mean, I guess if it's a weekday afternoon, but 70 on the Williamsburg Bridge, you would have to have the most ideal traffic circumstances to make that happen. That is not common.
I don't even think if like they closed it down for a film shoot, they would be going 70 on the Williamsburg Bridge.
That's pretty accurate. I mean, it's so funny. At one point when I first had to drive in New York, I think the first time I had to drive here as a resident, I was moving and I realized for the first time that the speed limit in all of Manhattan is 25 miles per hour. And I was floored. I was thinking, oh my goodness, that is so slow. How am I going to get anywhere? You don't get the chance to go more than 30 miles an hour. I was going 35 at one point and I felt like I was flying.
Yeah.
It is wild. So to go 70, so stressful. I was already pretty stressed out reading this chapter because I don't know if this is good writing or bad writing, but I was really annoyed with the Grey sisters. But I think that's the point. My skin was just crawling with the driving, though, because, it is such stressful driving.
You have two stressful, distracting things going on at once, which is the driving, which is terrifying. My hot take is that driving in Manhattan is actually fine because you're going so slow and you can't go anywhere.
It's really not that bad, yeah.
It's not stressful in that I feel that I'm going to get into a wreck. It's just like I have to manage my time.
Navigating is bad. Driving is okay.
Yes.
The bigger concern is that you will miss a turn, not get into a wreck.
Right. But going 70, the concern is that you will get into a wreck.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
So there's the driving, and that's going on. And then there are these very, like, alien-looking Grey sisters who have very different priorities and kind of think differently from our heroes. And it's not like I think a reader would be unfamiliar with them because of the Disney Hercules came out in the 90s and these books came out in the aughts. But it's still just, like, weird and a long time to go without sort of getting what their game is. Mm-hmm. So I totally hear that frustration. And I think as a writer, it can be kind of delicious to like sort of build and marinate it, but hopefully explanation coming soon.
Yes. I will say, I think of all of the stuff I've read in Percy Jackson, this section of this chapter was what I enjoyed the least, but I think it is inherently supposed to be a stressful portion. So that's kind of the point. But in all honesty, I was just kind of like, okay, they're going to get to camp. So I just kind of want to get to camp.
Yeah. Tell me what the problem with camp is. Because there's a difference between like showing stress and like making your reader stressed. They can be things that you use for a specific goal, but like they're very, very different experiences.
Right. And the other thing was maybe it's just because now that I'm a professional YA/middle grade book reader, I knew from formula purposes that they are going to get to camp.
Yeah.
I think it would have been different if there wasn't such a stressful thing happening at camp,
Right.
because then I would have considered, oh, maybe this driving won't go well and they won't be able to make it to camp. But I was reading this chapter knowing that they were gonna get there. It was just gonna be a not fun ride. So I was really just kind of going, okay, come on, let's get there.
Yeah.
So in spirit of that, let's breeze through this. So as they're driving, we also learn they don't just share an eye. They also share one singular tooth between the three of them. They're fighting over that. They're fighting over the eye. The car at one point is on the edge of the bridge. Percy says, if anybody's interested, we're going to die, which is great.
Incredible.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Annabeth says, don't worry, the Grey sisters know what they're doing. They're really very wise. And narrator Percy says, this is coming from the daughter of Athena. But I wasn't exactly reassured. We were skimming along the edge of a bridge 130 feet above the East River, which I do know is correct because I fact-checked that for the Spider-Man episode of Modern Muckraker.
Incredible.
It is 134 feet above the water. The sisters confirm that they are wise, saying that they know every street in Manhattan and they know the capital of Nepal, which is Kathmandu. That's not that hard. It's a pretty famous city. And the, quote, location you seek, unquote. And Percy goes, what? And they go, never mind. And they say that their eye was thrown into a lake the last time they told someone something unprovoked. This sparks another fight over the eyeball. It flies into the backseat. Percy is grossed out, understandably. Tyson is going to throw up from the car driving, which, as someone who gets motion sickness in cars, I totally get this. Percy rips off part of his shirt to grab the eye. As someone who doesn't like getting their fingers dirty, I relate to this.
Yep.
He says that he will give it back if they tell him the location. They say no. He says he'll throw it into oncoming traffic. Love this threat. Very good. And I was also, as the reader, I was very proud of this because I was thinking, let's just get through this. I want to get to the point. They then give in. They say 40, 31, 75, 12. And I thought, what is this? Lost? What are we going to go? 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42?
Oh, that's so funny. I didn't think about Lost when I was rereading that. Partly it's because I have read this book and I know what it's referring to. But part of it is like, there's only so many ways that numbers can relate to locations. Come on, guys. I know you're 12, but come on.
Right. Going along those lines, I thought, is this latitude, longitude? So I put in 40.31, 75.12 into Google Maps. That is the latitude and longitude of Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So I don't think that's it. But shout out to Doylestown, I guess.
Yeah.
As they approach Camp Half-Blood, Percy points out that Thalia's tree, which I now know it's Thalia, 100% confirmed pronunciation because there are videos of Uncle Rick saying it that way.
Great.
And people have sent that to me. So whether or not it's correct or whatever, the author has decided that that's how he pronounces this character's name. So for this Thalia, it's Thalia. I think that's also the more Greek way to say it. Apologies to anyone out there whose name is Thalia spelled this way. This is no disrespect to you. I would call you Thalia. I'm calling this Thalia because Rick Riordan told me to indirectly. Percy points out Thalia's tree, which he says, to help the reader understand the importance, he says it contains the life force of a fallen hero. This confirms my guess that Thalia is coming back at some point in the series because that is an incredibly ominous way to talk about the tree.
So specific.
To specifically say contains the life force of a fallen hero, that heavily implies she's coming back.
There's not a living thing in the basement or in the attic, guys. Like it's that specific.
Exactly, yeah. It's not just someone died, quote unquote, and was turned into a tree, or someone was about to die. Contains the life force? That's a new turn of phrase. Percy gives back the eye. They slam on the brakes. The car spins around 4 to 5 times, comes to a stop at Half-Blood Hill. I could only imagine the scene from Ace Ventura with the parking job. And then afterwards, the Grey sisters go, like a glove. Tyson burps. Percy wants to know the meaning of the numbers from the Grey sisters. Annabeth says, again, there's no time. And Percy immediately sees why. There are a group of campers that are under attack. And that is the end of chapter 3. And that is the end of this episode of The Newest Olympian. Sarah, thank you so much for joining. You will be back for our next episode to discuss at least all of chapter 4 and potentially some of chapter 5, depending on how much we go through. But until people can listen to that episode, if people want to find you doing stuff on the internet, in the podcast space, anywhere else, where can they do so?
You can find me on Twitter. I hang out there at Sarah Shachat. You can find me retweeting funny film memes and posting about stuff that I do. So come hang out. It's a good time.
Yeah, and listen to the stuff Sarah's made/makes. Unseen is great. Wolf 359 is great. The voice acting things that I've done with 0 Hours and Time Bombs, also great, even though I'm incredibly biased about them.
Time Bombs is amazing. Go listen to it.
Do it. Very fun stuff. All good things from good folks. So Sarah, thank you again for joining. Listeners, thank you for listening. And until we learn what is happening with these campers that are under attack, I'll see you later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Glow. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Google, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you're all caught up on the show and you don't know what to do, first, you could go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, join the Patreon, and get access to a bunch of bonus content, bonus episodes, director's commentary, and more. Or you can follow the show on social media. We're at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We've got a subreddit at reddit.com/r/thenewestolympian, and the Patreon gets you access to the patron-exclusive Discord. Speaking of that Patreon, I want to thank our producer-level patrons: Lauda Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Hoskovchova, Veronica Bartova, Natanya Page, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tough Beifong, Moo Productions, Don't Call Me Nymphadora, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Griffin Dork, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Minka Dreesen, Can't I See We Brain, Matt Barger, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Mooney B, Boney Pony, Harlan Christ, Heather McMillan, Casey Canales, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Aidan Lippold, Josh Sayer, Percy Blue, Josh Wilkie, Martin Anvik, Abby Ryan, Josh Clements, Angela MF, Mary Baumgartner, Shannon Yvonne Aguilar, Wise Girl, Alpacas Are Hope, Finn TZ, Ribbon Monstrosity, Samantha McNamara, Tate Sasson, Emil Oscar Thomason, Roxas 1912, Rafaela, Ashton Gabrielson, Cara Maren, Marco Redhouse, Falcon, Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Justin Lux, and Caden Mack. If you want to support the show non-monetarily, spreading it via word of mouth goes such a long way. If you think of someone that would like the show, why don't you reach out to them directly and say, hey, there's this podcast called The Newest Olympian. I think you would like it. Or you can just post about the show on social media, or leave us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're using. All of these things really help, and I'm very appreciative to those of you who decide to do so, but I'm just so thankful you listened to this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, which is again with Sarah Shachat, but we will be covering chapters 4 and the beginning of chapter 5 of The Sea of Monsters. But until then, I'll see you later. Hello, everyone. How's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. I'm here in the studio right now, and I'm actually getting ready for another recording of this wonderful podcast you should listen to called The Newest Olympian. And I thought it'd be nice just to tell you all the different prep work that I do to reduce mouth sounds on The Newest Olympian. Obviously, ASMR Mike is going to be a little more mouth soundy because I'm so close to the microphone, but I do take a lot of effort into trying to reduce those on the podcast. I drink a lot of water before recording. I eat apples before recording because those can get rid of some of the saliva that's in your mouth. I brush my teeth before recording because that can clear it up as well. And then in editing, I run it through an audio cleanup software that reduces clicks. I actually use 2 different settings to remove clicks. Then Sherry, when she does the first pass of edits, removes some of the clicks. And then I always double check the edits and adjust to make sure that all those clicks are gone. So I hope that you appreciate that. And I do apologize that if ASMR Mike kind of highlights those, but that could give you the perspective of how many clicks are not present when you listen to the episode. Anyway, that's my time. And thank you for listening to the episode.